They say that in space, no one can hear you scream. But that's utter bollocks, honestly. In a galactic arena filled with species that have at least 5 ears each, even the smallest whimper is bound to get noticed. And as far as humanity's concerned, we were the kid in the corner with a cheap plastic knife at a gun show. "Welcome to the galactic shindig," Avalon muttered, stepping off the ship with all the enthusiasm of a cat being dunked in water. Her diplomatic credentials were supposed to mean something among the stars, but judging by the way the assembled aliens were looking at her, she might as well have shown up in clown shoes and a propeller hat. "You sure you want to lead this freak show?" asked Rin, her second in command, a fellow who looked like he might mug you for fun but would probably feel bad about it later. His grin was sharp enough to cut glass, but the eyes, dead as a politician's promises. "Do I have a choice?" Avalon shot back, plastering on a smile that suggested she was enjoying herself about as much as one might enjoy a dental examination from Dr. Frankenstein. The arena itself was a marvel of impractical architecture. It was as if someone had decided that the best way to showcase advanced civilizations was to cram them all into a giant cosmic blender and hit the puree button. The result? A mess of platforms, floating walkways, and neon signs advertising everything from interstellar body mod clinics to psychic pet grooming services. "Level 0 species entry," barked a voice that sounded like it gargled nails for breakfast. A bulbous creature with more tentacles than a hentai artist's wet dream loomed over them, its beady eyes narrowing at the humans like they were something it scraped off its shoe. "Lovely," Rin muttered, flashing a badge that probably wouldn't get them past the velvet rope, but might at least buy them a few seconds before the inevitable ejection. "Here to represent Earth." "Ah, the planet of endless reruns," Tentacle Face sneered. "You're brave, I'll give you that. Stupid, but brave." "We aim to please," Avalon said, stepping up to meet its gaze, or lack thereof, head on. "I hear you folks have a surplus of dark matter and not enough places to stick it." "Dark matter's the everyone's favorite shiny thing nowadays," the alien sniffed, its voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for people who talk loudly on their cell phones in public. "And you want a slice of the pie. More like a crumb," Avalon admitted, shrugging. "We're not picky." The alien chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding underfoot, and waved them through. "Good luck, humans, you'll need it." "Great, we're in," Rin said, as they stepped onto a platform that spiraled upwards, offering a panoramic view of the arena. Everywhere they looked, representatives from all sorts of species were engaged in what seemed to be negotiations, deals, or, in some cases, outright brawls. "Now what?" Avalon took a deep breath, scanning the chaos with the eye of someone who'd been thrown into the deep end more times than she cared to count. "Now," she said, "we find someone even more desperate than us and make an offer they can't refuse. And if that doesn't work, then we do what humans do best," Avalon replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "We wing it." The plan was simple, or at least it sounded simple when you laid it out in a conference room back on Earth where the biggest threat was a malfunctioning coffee machine. In practice, it was like trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded and juggling flaming chainsaws. "Ever wonder why they invited us in the first place?" Rin asked, dodging a particularly aggressive-looking representative from the Squarlians, a species that resembled a cross between a porcupine and a bad mood. "Maybe they thought we'd provide comic relief," Avalon suggested. "Or maybe they're just bored and wanted to watch us flail around like headless chickens." "Charming thought," Rin said, grimacing as a particularly pungent odor wafted over from a nearby stall selling some kind of undulating delicacy. "On the bright side, it can't get much worse, right?" As if the universe itself had heard his words and decided to prove him wrong, a klaxon blared through the arena, accompanied by flashing lights and a voice that announced in 12 different languages that the next phase of the competition was about to begin. "Well, shit," Avalon said, as the floor beneath them began to shift and they found themselves being herded towards a massive arena space like cattle to the slaughter. Ladies and gentlemen and those of indeterminate gender, boomed a voice that could probably peel paint, echoing through the colossal structure. Welcome to the Galactic Dark Matter Challenge, where the stakes are high and the odds are. Well, let's just say you should have read the fine print. Now this, Rin muttered as they shuffled forward, is where the fun really begins. If by fun you mean opportunity to get killed in a variety of inventive ways, Avalon shot back, then sure, loads of fun. They were joined by representatives from other species, each looking more bizarre than the last. There was a group of beings who seemed to communicate through interpretive dance, a race whose features constantly shifted like a bad acid trip, and a contingent of what looked like sentient boulders with an unexpected fondness for glitter. "All right, folks," the announcer continued, as holographic displays flared to life above the crowd, showing stats and odds that fluctuated wildly. "The objective is simple: secure as much dark matter as you can without getting obliterated. Last team standing wins." "Piece of cake," Rin said, as they were handed what looked suspiciously like a weaponized spatula. "Sure," Avalon replied, hefting the bizarre implement with a sigh. Just another day at the office. As the countdown began, the assembled competitors tensed, ready for action. Avalon glanced at Rin, their shared look an unspoken agreement. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. "Ready to make history?" Avalon asked, her voice low and grimly determined. "Depends," Rin replied with a smirk. "Does history involve surviving this mess?" "Survival's optional," Avalon said. "Kicking ass is mandatory." With that, the klaxon blared again and they were off, diving into the fray with all the reckless abandon of a species that didn't know better. Around them, chaos erupted as competitors clashed, each jostling for position, for advantage, for the chance to come out on top. "I really hope this isn't how humanity's remembered," Rin shouted over the din, blocking a strike from a creature that looked like it had crawled out from under someone's bed. "If we screw this up," Avalon yelled back, ducking another swing, "it'll be a miracle if we're remembered at all." They fought on, moving through the carnage with a mix of desperation and grim determination. Every step was a gamble, every move a calculated risk. But then again, that was humanity in a nutshell, betting everything on the long shot even when the odds were stacked against them. And somewhere amidst the chaos, Avalon found herself smiling, because for the first time in a long while she felt alive. As the battle raged, as alliances formed and shattered, as the ranks of competitors thinned, Avalon realized something else. They weren't just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for the right to stand among the stars, to prove that humanity, for all its follies and flaws, was worth more than a passing footnote in the annals of interstellar history. "Hey, Rin," she called, her voice rising above the tumult. "You think we'll live to tell this tale?" "Wouldn't count on it," came the reply, punctuated by the satisfying thud of a well-timed counterattack. "But hell, it'll be one hell of a story either way." And with that, Avalon charged forward, heart pounding, adrenaline singing in her veins. Because whether they won or lost, whether they lived or died, they were here, they were fighting. And that in the end was what truly mattered. "Here's to the underdogs," Avalon whispered, as they plunged back into the fray, determination blazing in her eyes. "And to hell with the odds." Avalon found herself elbow to elbow with a mass of squirming, unfriendly flesh and metal appendages as they were herded into the arena's central partition. It was like being crammed into a commuter train during rush hour, if the train was on fire and the other passengers were actively trying to kill you. The smell alone was enough to make her eyes water, a heady mix of burnt ozone, alien sweat, and something that suspiciously resembled rotten cabbage. Rin nudged her as they squeezed past a particularly malevolent-looking pair of Vorthons, their sleek, reptilian forms giving off an air of disdain that suggested they were above this sort of mingling. "You get the feeling we're not exactly welcome here." "Gee, you think?" Avalon replied, managing to dodge a flailing limb from a creature that resembled an overgrown insect. "I feel about as popular as a rash on prom night." The Vorthons, for their part, seemed to be doing their best to pretend the humans didn't exist, which was a bit like ignoring a particularly irritating fly buzzing around your face. But Avalon wasn't about to let a couple of scaly snobs get under her skin. She had bigger cosmic fish to fry. "Hey, Avalon." A familiar voice rang out over the din, and she turned to see Daxel weaving his way through the crowd, grinning like he'd just discovered a new way to break the laws of physics. "Guess what I found? Please tell me it's a way out of this nightmare," Avalon said, though she couldn't help smiling as he joined them. Daxel had that effect on people. He was the kind of guy who could make jury duty sound like a good time. "Not quite, but it's close," he said, eyes twinkling with that particular brand of mischief that always seemed to precede one of his wild ideas. "I managed to get access to the arena's schematics, found something interesting." "Interesting how?" Rin asked, eyeing Daxel with the kind of skepticism one reserved for dodgy salesmen and politicians. "There's a dark matter conduit running right through the building," Daxel said, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "I think we might be able to tap into it." "That sounds incredibly dangerous," Avalon pointed out. "And illegal. Did I mention dangerous? Hey, when's the last time illegal and dangerous stopped us?" Daxel replied, grinning like a kid in a candy store. "Good point," Avalon admitted, feeling a thrill of excitement despite herself. "But how do we pull it off without getting vaporized?" "That's where my genius comes in," Daxel said, tapping the side of his head. "I've got a plan." Rin snorted. "You always have a plan, doesn't mean it's a good one." "Trust me," Daxel said, placing a hand over his heart with exaggerated sincerity. "It's foolproof." "Famous last words," Avalon muttered, but she couldn't deny the flicker of hope that sparked within her. Maybe, just maybe, they had a shot at this after all. Before they could hash out the details, a sudden hush fell over the arena, the kind of silence that usually precedes something catastrophic or incredibly stupid. Given their current circumstances, Avalon wouldn't have been surprised if it was both. The Vorthons had taken center stage, their leader stepping forward with the kind of regal arrogance that suggested they were used to being the smartest person in the room, which, given present company, wasn't saying much. "Attention, lesser species," he announced, his voice as smooth and cold as a glacier. "We are here to remind you of your place in the cosmic hierarchy." "Oh great, a lecture," Rin muttered under his breath. "Just what we needed." "Silence, human," the Vorthon leader snapped, his gaze icy enough to give frostbite. "Your kind is here by our sufferance alone." "Yeah, I feel real suffered," Avalon shot back, earning a few scandalized looks from the surrounding aliens. She could practically feel the disdain radiating off them, but she was past caring. "We might not have fancy scales or shiny tech, but that doesn't mean we're here to roll over and play dead." "We shall see," the Vorthon replied, his eyes narrowing. "Your bravado will be tested soon enough." With that, the Vorthons withdrew, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake. Avalon took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their words settle heavily on her shoulders. She knew they'd just made a powerful enemy, but what else was new? Humanity had been making enemies since the dawn of time. "Looks like we're the underdogs again," Daxel said, his voice laced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Just how I like it." "Yeah, well, let's not get too comfortable," Rin added, his expression grim. "Underdogs can still end up as roadkill if they aren't careful." "Or heroes," Avalon pointed out, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. But what choice did they have? It was either fight or fade into obscurity, and she wasn't ready to give up just yet. With a determined nod, she turned to face her team. "Okay, let's do this. Daxel, you take point on the dark matter scheme. Rin, keep an eye on our Vorthon friends. I'll handle the diplomacy." "That's what we're calling it now," Rin snorted, but there was a glint of respect in his eyes. "Hey, I'm a diplomat," Avalon said with a shrug. "Time to make some waves." As the chaos resumed within the arena, Avalon felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were up against impossible odds, outgunned and outclassed, but that had never stopped humanity before. If nothing else, they were damn good at punching above their weight. While Daxel slipped away to work his magic, Avalon and Rin navigated the crowd, doing their best to avoid any unnecessary entanglements. It wasn't long before they found themselves face to face with a group of Varkari, a species known for their love of bureaucracy and red tape. In other words, natural allies for a diplomat. "Greetings, esteemed Varkari," Avalon began, her voice smooth and practiced. "I'd like to discuss a possible alliance." "Alliance?" The lead Varkari blinked, its many eyes rearranging themselves into a configuration that suggested interest. "What makes you think we would ally with a level 0 species?" "Because," Avalon replied, fixing the alien with a steely gaze, "we've got something no one else here has: creativity and desperation. A potent combination, don't you think?" The Varkari considered her words, its multitude of limbs twitching in what Avalon hoped was a sign of contemplation rather than indigestion. "Continue. We're looking for a partner in resource acquisition," Avalon said, choosing her words carefully. "We know the dangers, but we're willing to take the risks. In exchange, we offer our unique perspective on problem solving." "You mean recklessness," Rin interjected with a grin. Potato, Avalon shot back. The Varkari seemed to mull this over, its attention flicking between Avalon and Rin like it was deciding whether to eat them or hear them out. Finally, it nodded, a gesture that Avalon took as a sign of agreement or at least not outright refusal. "Very well," the Varkari said at last. "We shall consider your proposal. But be warned, betrayal will not be tolerated." "Understood," Avalon replied, forcing a smile. "We're not in the business of making enemies, just friends," Rin added with a wink. As they moved away from the Varkari, Avalon let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "One down, who knows how many to go. At least we didn't get vaporized," Rin said, clapping her on the back. "We're on a roll." "Yeah, well, let's hope our luck holds," Avalon replied, scanning the arena for any sign of Daxel. They'd need his technical expertise if they had any hope of pulling this off. It wasn't long before they spotted him, ducking out of a side corridor with a triumphant grin plastered across his face. "I did it," he announced, practically vibrating with excitement. "We're in, seriously?" Avalon asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "That fast? Turns out the security system isn't rated for human ingenuity," he replied, shrugging as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We're all set to initiate the dark matter siphon." "Okay, so what's the catch?" Rin asked, his gaze skeptical. "No catch," Daxel insisted, though his eyes flicked nervously around the room. "I mean, there's a chance we might inadvertently cause a catastrophic implosion that wipes out the entire arena, but that's a risk I'm willing to take." "You're a real optimist, you know that," Avalon said, shaking her head. "All right, let's get this show on the road." As they moved towards the conduit, Avalon couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't paranoia not when you were surrounded by creatures who'd just as soon knife you in the back as look at you. She kept her senses sharp, ready for whatever might come their way. The conduit was tucked away in a section of the arena that didn't see much foot traffic, which was just as well. The fewer witnesses, the better. Daxel set to work immediately, fingers flying across his datapad as he brought up an array of schematics and codes that looked like gibberish to anyone who wasn't a certified genius. "How's it looking?" Rin asked, peering over Daxel's shoulder. "Piece of cake," Daxel replied, not missing a beat. "Just gotta bypass this subroutine, reroute the quantum flow, and there we go." Avalon watched as the conduit hummed to life, casting a sickly green glow that bathed the corridor in an eerie light. She couldn't help feeling a pang of unease. It was one thing to talk about messing with dark matter, but another thing entirely to actually do it. "Now or never," she murmured, steeling herself for whatever came next. With one final keystroke, Daxel activated the siphon, and Avalon held her breath as the conduit pulsed with energy, the dark matter flowing through it like a raging river. For a moment, she felt a flicker of fear of the unknown, of what lay beyond, but then it was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that made her feel invincible. "The system's stable," Daxel announced, his voice filled with barely contained excitement. "We've done it." "Now comes the hard part," Rin said, glancing nervously down the corridor. "Getting out of here in one piece." "Let's not stick around for the fireworks," Avalon agreed, already moving back towards the main arena. As they slipped back into the throng of competitors, Avalon felt an odd sense of elation. They'd managed to pull off the impossible, to take what they needed and show the galaxy that humanity wasn't to be underestimated. But there was still a long way to go, alliances to forge, dangers to face. "Hey, Avalon," Daxel said, falling into step beside her. "You think we actually stand a chance at winning this thing?" "I think we've got a chance at surviving," she replied, a wry smile playing at her lips. And sometimes that's enough. As the chaos of the arena closed in around them once more, Avalon felt a strange sense of peace. They might be outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed, but they'd come this far. They'd fight for their place among the stars, and whatever the outcome, they'd do it together. "Ready to make history?" Avalon asked, echoing her earlier words. "More like ready to survive it," Rin replied, his grin sharp as ever. "Either way," Daxel added, "it's gonna be one hell of a ride." With that, they plunged back into the fray, determination burning in their hearts. Because in the end, they were human and nothing, not even the vastness of space, could take that away from them. The arena was a swirling mass of chaos, like an entire galaxy's worth of bad decisions crammed into one place. Neon signs flickered overhead, casting garish shadows on the throng of beings below. It was a place where you'd be just as likely to get a knife in the back as a handshake. Avalon navigated the crowd with practiced ease, though even she had to admit that it was more luck than skill keeping her from getting trampled. Daxel was at her side, practically buzzing with energy from their little dark matter escapade. "I gotta say, Avalon, my adrenaline levels are through the roof. I haven't felt this alive since that time I accidentally triggered a self-destruct sequence." "Just keep your head on straight," Avalon said, her eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. "We're not out of this yet." "Trouble?" Daxel snorted. "In this place?" Unthinkable. As if on cue, a group of Slarkians, hulking insectoids with tempers shorter than a neutron's lifespan, appeared ahead. They were blocking the path like a particularly aggressive wall. "Great," Avalon muttered under her breath. "Just what we need. Giant bugs with superiority complexes." The lead Slarkian, its mandibles clicking ominously, stepped forward. "Humans," it hissed, like the word itself tasted bad. "This arena is no place for your kind." Avalon raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Funny, you guys say that a lot, yet here we are still standing. Must be doing something right. Or just too stupid to die," Daxel added helpfully. The Slarkian made a noise that might have been a growl, its companions clicking in agreement. "You have something that is not yours. We suggest you release it." "Something that isn't yours," Avalon feigned ignorance. "Oh, you mean this?" She gestured vaguely around herself. The insectoid's eyes narrowed. "The dark matter, it belongs to us." "Well, that's funny," Avalon replied. "Because last I checked, finders keepers." A tense moment passed as the two groups stared each other down. Then the Slarkians moved, and for a second Avalon thought they were about to be trampled. But instead the insectoids parted, revealing a sleek metallic device being carried by two of them. "We have the means to take it back," the lead Slarkian said, a cruel edge to its voice. Daxel looked at the device and then at Avalon. "They've got a dark matter extractor. That's bad news." "Yeah, no shit," Avalon murmured. "Ideas?" "Well," Daxel said, scratching his chin, "we could stand here and discuss it until they get bored and leave." Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, depending on how you looked at it, Avalon's brain worked a little faster than that. "All right, new plan, Daxel, distract them. I've got an idea." "Distract them? With what?" "My charm and wit," Daxel quipped, even as he stepped forward with an exaggerated flourish. "Greetings, esteemed Slarkians. Might I interest you in a demonstration of human ingenuity?" The insectoids paused, clearly confused by the sudden shift in tone. Taking advantage of the distraction, Avalon moved to the side, her eyes scanning the arena for anything they might use to their advantage. Her gaze landed on a precarious stack of crates, each marked with a symbol she recognized as the Universal Hazardous Material sign. Perfect. Rin, I need a hand, she called, spotting her companion weaving through the crowd towards them. We've got a bug problem. Rin arrived, taking in the situation with a quick glance. Well, aren't they a charming bunch? Help me with those crates, Avalon said, nodding towards the stack. Let's see how they like a little chaos. Working together, they pushed the crates, sending them tumbling towards the Slarkians. The sound was deafening, and for a moment, Avalon almost felt bad. Almost. The insectoids scattered, their formation breaking as they tried to avoid the falling debris. One particularly unlucky Slarkian caught a crate to the face, collapsing in a heap. Nice work, Daxel said as he rejoined them. Now what? Now we get out of here, Avalon replied, glancing at the extractor the Slarkians had dropped in the chaos. And maybe take a souvenir. As the Slarkians regrouped, Avalon and her team slipped away, leaving the extractor behind. There would be other ways to deal with the dark matter, and she had a feeling Daxel would come up with something suitably creative. They moved quickly, weaving through the crowd as they made their way back to the relative safety of their own corner of the arena. It wasn't much, but at least it was home for now. So, what now? Rin asked, catching his breath. We've got the dark matter, pissed off half the arena and nearly got squished by giant bugs. Welcome to another day at the office, Avalon said with a wry smile. We need to consolidate what we've got, figure out our next move. Daxel nodded, his fingers already flying across his datapad as he checked the status of the siphon. The dark matter's still stable. We've got time, but not much. Great, Avalon said. Because I was worried things were going too smoothly. As they regrouped, Avalon couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They'd managed to hold their own against the odds, and even if they were still vastly outnumbered, they'd proven they were more than capable of holding their ground. All right, let's get to work, she said, her team nodding in agreement. There was still a long way to go, and 1,000 ways for things to go wrong, but Avalon couldn't ask for better companions for the journey. Think we'll ever get used to this? Daxel asked, casting a wary eye over the bustling arena around them. Probably not, Rin replied, a grin playing at the corners of his mouth. But hey, wouldn't want things to get boring, right? Avalon chuckled, feeling the tension begin to ease from her shoulders. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. And as long as they kept moving forward, maybe, just maybe, they'd make it through this mess in one piece. The arena's chaos felt almost comforting now, like an old, belligerent friend. Sure, it was trying to kill them, but at least it was consistent. And really, what more could you ask for? All right, Avalon said, her voice firm. Let's make some history. Or a hell of a mess, Daxel added with a grin. Either way, Rin said, it's gonna be one hell of a ride. The Galactic Arena was basically a space opera gone wrong, an interstellar marketplace of questionable motives and shifty alliances. And there stood Avalon, balancing on the knife edge between survival and spectacular failure. You could almost hear the cosmic laughter echoing through the neon haze, low and mocking, like the universe's own laugh track. Avalon had learned early on that the only way to navigate this mess was to keep moving. So, she kept moving, weaving through the crowd with Rin and Daxel, her eyes darting everywhere at once. The Slarkians weren't about to forget their last encounter anytime soon, and she had a feeling more trouble was lurking just out of sight, the way a bad smell clings to an old sock. Political alliances, Daxel huffed as they ducked into a dimly lit alcove. I always thought politics involved more talking and less running for your life. That's what makes this place so special, Avalon replied, peeking around the corner. Everyone's got a knife out, just waiting for you to turn your back. And here I thought it was just me they didn't like, Rin said, grinning as if he just shared a particularly funny joke. Nope, Avalon said. It's us, collectively and individually. We're just that charming. As they caught their breath, a reptilian Vorthan approached, its sleek scales glistening like it had bathed in oil slick. While the Slarkians were all muscle and rage, the Vorthans were the opposite, deceptively elegant and viciously cunning. "Ah, humans," the Vorthan said, its voice smooth and slithery. "Making friends wherever you go, I see." "That's us," Daxel said, flashing a grin. "We're the life of every murder party." The Vorthan, who introduced itself as K-Lax, tilted its head, eyes narrowing. "Word travels fast here." "You're attracting attention and not the good kind." Avalyn crossed her arms. "We usually aim for the kind that doesn't end with us dead." "Then might I suggest a collaboration?" K-Lax said, the gleam in its eyes sharp as a blade. "You've managed to disrupt the status quo." "Some would see potential in that." "Some might," Rin said, "but most just see a couple of walking targets." "True," K-Lax conceded, "but targets with a knack for survival tend to have a longer shelf life." Avalyn glanced at her companions, weighing the offer. A partnership with K-Lax could mean resources and information, the kind they desperately needed. But it also meant putting their trust in someone who could turn on them faster than a gravity well. "What's in it for you?" she asked, her skepticism as thick as the tension in the room. K-Lax's smile was unsettling, a cold, calculated stretch of lips that promised nothing but trouble. "Let's just say, I have my reasons for wanting to see the current balance." "Upset sounds like our kind of plan," Daxel said. "The kind that makes people uncomfortable." "Exactly," K-Lax replied, its voice dripping with amusement. "You'll find I'm quite good at making people uncomfortable." With a new, uneasy alliance formed, Avalyn and her team moved deeper into the arena's labyrinthine depths. The place was a maze designed to confuse and contain, like some cosmic joke made flesh. Every corridor seemed to lead to another pitfall, another trap. It was a wonder anyone managed to survive here at all. "That Vorthan gives me the creeps," Rin muttered as they walked. "With friends like that, who needs enemies? Consider it a necessary evil," Avalyn said, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of trouble. "Right now we need every edge we can get. And here I thought edges were good for cutting yourself," Daxel chimed in. "Seems that's exactly what we're doing." "Enough with the optimism," Avalyn said, rolling her eyes. "Let's just focus on getting to the extraction point." Daxel's dark matter siphon was still ticking, a device cobbled together from desperation and a complete disregard for safety regulations. It was, in short, exactly the kind of thing you'd expect from someone like Daxel. "How's our time looking?" Avalyn asked as they neared their destination. "Like a sandcastle at high tide," Daxel replied, eyes on his datapad. "We've got maybe an hour before this thing goes kaput." "Perfect," Rin said, sarcasm dripping from his voice. Just enough time for a leisurely stroll. As they reached the extraction point, a derelict platform abandoned and forgotten by the arena's past occupants, they found themselves not alone. A group of mercenaries, all armor and attitude, lounged around the place like they owned it. "Well, this is cozy," Avalyn said, stepping forward. "We interrupting your nap time?" The mercenaries, led by a burly human with more scars than skin, looked less than thrilled to see them. "This spot's taken, sweetheart. Find your own." "Sweetheart," Avalyn echoed, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Oh, you're gonna wish you'd chosen your words better." "Easy, Avalyn," Daxel said, trying to diffuse the tension with a smile. "Let's not make enemies before breakfast." The mercenary leader snorted, unimpressed. "Look, we don't want trouble, but we ain't moving either." "Thing is," Rin said, stepping up beside Avalyn, "we need this spot, and we're not exactly the ask nicely types." "More the ask with a blaster types," Daxel added, waving his datapad like it was a weapon. "Got it right here, fully charged and everything." Avalyn grinned, her hand resting on the handle of her own blaster. "So what'll it be? You clear out or we make you." The standoff hung in the air like a bad smell. For a moment the only sound was the hum of the arena, the distant roar of a crowd engaged in some far-off brutality. Finally, the mercenary leader nodded. "All right, you win this round. We got better things to do than tangle with you lot." With a few grumbles and dirty looks, the mercenaries vacated the platform, leaving Evelyn and her team to set up shop. It was a victory, albeit a small and temporary one, but in this place you took what you could get. Well, that was easier than expected, Rin said, watching the mercenaries disappear into the crowd. Almost wish they'd put up more of a fight. Let's not get greedy, Evelyn replied, already focusing on the task at hand. We've got work to do. Daxel set to work, connecting his siphon to the platform's power grid. For such a ramshackle device, the thing hummed to life with an almost cheerful whir, like it knew it was about to do something incredibly dangerous and was thrilled about it. You really think this thing's gonna hold? Rin asked, eyeing the siphon with a mix of awe and horror. It's held this long, Daxel said, his hands moving with practiced precision. I'm betting on it holding a little longer. Comforting, Evelyn said dryly. Just let us know if it decides to blow up, okay? As Daxel worked, Evelyn and Rin kept watch, their eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. The arena was a churning sea of bodies and lights, a breeding ground for chaos and opportunity. And somewhere in that chaos, their enemies were lurking, waiting for a chance to strike. You know, Rin said, leaning against a railing, sometimes I think about what we'd be doing if we weren't caught up in this mess. Still running for our lives, probably, Evelyn replied, her gaze never wavering. At least this way we've got a purpose. And here I thought our purpose was avoid getting killed, Rin said with a chuckle. Same thing, Evelyn said, a rare smile tugging at her lips. Now shut up and let me focus. Despite the odds stacked against them, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were exactly where they needed to be. It was a strange comfort, knowing they were fighting for something bigger than themselves, even if it was just a fleeting chance at survival. Extraction's underway, Daxel announced, his voice tinged with excitement. Dark matter's flowing like a dream. A dream or a nightmare? Rin asked, his tone teasing. Depends on your perspective, Daxel said, grinning. Honestly, I think it's a bit of both. With the siphon working its magic, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope, a spark that refused to be snuffed out by the arena's oppressive atmosphere. They were doing it, defying the odds, challenging the status quo, and it felt damn good. But as with all things in the arena, peace was short-lived. A group of officials dressed in the garb of the arena's self-proclaimed authorities approached with the kind of confidence only absolute power could grant. Here we go, Rin muttered, straightening. Showtime. The lead official, a Vorthan of considerable bulk and even greater self-importance, stepped forward. You are in violation of arena protocol. Cease your activities and surrender the dark matter. Violation, Evelyn said, feigning innocence. Why, we were just making ourselves at home. The official's eyes narrowed. You humans think you can disrupt the natural order. We cannot allow this affront to go unpunished. Evelyn exchanged a look with Daxel and Rin. By now, they were used to being the galaxy's favorite scapegoats, and this was just another day at the office. Natural order, huh? Rin said, crossing his arms. Seems to me like the only order here is chaos, which we're quite fond of, Daxel added, so you might say we're actually preserving it. The official was not amused. You have one chance to comply. This is not a negotiation. Evelyn sighed, her expression hardening. Funny, because it sounds like you're giving us a choice. You mock us at your peril, the Vorthan hissed, gesturing for the other officials to advance. All right, enough of this, Evelyn said, her patience snapping. If you want to play, let's play. As if on cue, the arena erupted in a cacophony of noise and chaos. The officials moved in, their presence a threat more implied than overt, but no less dangerous. Time for Plan B, Rin asked, turning to Evelyn. Plan B, Evelyn confirmed, also known as Run Like Hell. With a nod, the three of them broke into a sprint, leaving the siphon behind but taking the dark matter with them, stashed safely in a compact containment unit. They dashed through the throng, the officials' shouts lost in the din. The arena was alive, a beast unto itself, and Evelyn realized that in this moment they were part of something larger. They were a thorn in the side of an establishment that desperately needed shaking up, a spark in an arena built on shadows. and as the chaos enveloped them, Avalon couldn't help but laugh. It was a laugh tinged with madness and desperation, the kind that could only come from knowing you were in over your head but refusing to back down. Because in the end, they were human, a small, stubborn species in a galaxy that would rather see them squashed. But they'd made it this far, and they weren't about to stop now. As they rounded a corner, the arena's lights casting everything in a garish glow, Avalon looked at her companions and found strength in their shared resolve. "Think we can keep this up?" Rin asked, breathless but grinning. "Not sure," Daxel replied, "but I'm willing to find out." Avalon nodded, determination written across her face. "Then let's keep moving. We've got a galaxy to piss off." With that, they plunged further into the arena's depths, ready to face whatever new horrors it had in store. Because in this place of endless chaos and peril, they were exactly where they belonged. The arena's labyrinthine corridors were alive with the sound of distant chaos, the kind that promised mercenary brawls and ill-advised wagers. It was almost comforting, in a here-we-go-again kind of way. Avalon led the charge, her boots pounding against the metal floor with an urgency that didn't quite match her casual expression. "Think they'll give up after this?" Rin huffed, his voice breathless with a mix of exertion and excitement. "Or are we running for the cardiovascular benefits?" Avalon shot him a sidelong glance. "If we're doing this to get fit, I want a refund." Rin chuckled, adjusting the strap of his shoulder bag, which was suspiciously heavy with precious dark matter. "We could try talking to them. I hear reason's making a comeback this decade." "Yeah," Daxel panted from behind, "right after honesty and low-calorie chocolate." They rounded a corner, skidding to a halt in a narrow passage where the only lighting came from flickering overhead fluorescents, making everything look like it was under perpetual interrogation. Unfortunately, the interrogation involved their imminent demise. Avalon squinted down the corridor. "It's like they installed mood lighting. Too bad the mood is murder." "Could be worse," Rin said, catching his breath. "There could be smooth jazz, maybe that'd make them more relaxed," Daxel muttered, tapping at his datapad while keeping one eye on the corridor. "Or at least lull them into a stupor." Avalon took a deep breath, steeling herself. "All right, we need a plan that doesn't involve us getting shot, sliced, or otherwise dismembered." Daxel raised an eyebrow, still fiddling with his device. "You mean like a holiday? More like a miracle," Rin quipped. "But I hear those are on backorder." They pressed on, slipping through a service tunnel that seemed designed more for maintenance drones than humans. It was cramped and smelled like something had died there, probably someone's hopes and dreams, Avalon mused. "How we doing on that dark matter siphon, Daxel?" Avalon asked, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest," Daxel replied, his tone as dry as a desolate moon. "But it's holding for now." Rin peeked around the next corner, then pulled back quickly. "Ah, crap, more of the arena's finest, and they brought friends." "Lovely," Avalon sighed. "Our fan club's really growing." Avalon glanced at Rin and Daxel. This was the moment where she had to pull a rabbit out of a hat, except she had no hat and the rabbit was probably roadkill by now. Still, her team was watching, expecting her to have a plan, or at least the semblance of one. "All right," she said, her voice low but firm. "We fight, we run, we improvise. But most importantly, we survive." "Got it. Got it," Rin and Daxel echoed, the latter flashing a grin that was way too eager considering the circumstances. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, a rhythmic staccato that signaled the approach of more enforcers. Avalon's fingers curled around the grip of her blaster, feeling the reassuring weight of it, a poor substitute for security, but better than nothing. "Showtime," Rin murmured, readying his own weapon with a grim smile. The enforcers came into view, a mix of species united by their uniform disdain for intruders. At their head was a Slarkian, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light like a disco ball from a particularly violent dance floor. "Intruders," it hissed, its voice a guttural rumble that seemed to vibrate through the walls. "Surrender the dark matter or be exterminated." "Exterminated," Rin echoed. What are we, vermin? Speak for yourself, Daxel said, his hands still working over the datapad. I prefer unwanted guests. Evelyn raised her blaster, her expression hardening. Sorry, but we've got places to be and people to annoy. Extermination's gonna have to wait. The room exploded with motion. Blaster fire seared through the air, the acrid scent of ozone filling the corridor. Evelyn ducked and rolled, firing shots that ricocheted off a Slarkian's exoskeleton with a sound like hail on a tin roof. Rin was a whirl of movement, his laughter mingling with the chaos like he was enjoying a particularly thrilling roller coaster. Is it just me, he called out, or is this starting to feel like an average Tuesday? Depends on your average Tuesday. Daxel shouted back, his voice barely audible over the din. He ducked behind a support pillar, typing furiously on his datapad. Just keep them busy a little longer. Oh, sure. Rin replied, now crouched behind a crate. I'll just distract them with my dance moves. The Slarkian lunged, mandibles snapping with lethal intent. Evelyn dodged to the side, the creature's bulk slamming into the wall where she'd been a moment ago. Nice try, she taunted, firing a shot that sizzled against the creature's shell but didn't penetrate. But next time, buy me dinner first. The fight was brutal and fast, a blur of blaster bolts and shouted curses. Each member of the team was a flurry of desperate action, their movements a testament to both their skill and a remarkable ability to avoid dying. Finally, Daxel let out a triumphant shout. Got it. As if on cue, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the corridor into darkness. There was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the faint hum of emergency lighting kicking in, a dim, ghostly glow that cast everything in eerie shadows. What did you do? Evelyn asked, her voice low and breathless. Just a little blackout, Daxel said, his grin visible even in the low light. Thought we could use a dramatic exit. Dramatic's one word for it, Rin muttered, rubbing at a scorch mark on his sleeve. Insane is another. They didn't wait to see if the enforcers would recover. With the corridor shrouded in confusion, they took off, ducking through another narrow passage that led deeper into the bowels of the arena. We're headed towards the maintenance shafts, Daxel said, leading the way. I've got a friend there who might help. Friend? Evelyn asked, her tone skeptical. Or friend? Well, he hasn't tried to kill me yet, Daxel replied, shrugging. So in this place that counts as friendship. Rin chuckled, though the sound was tinged with fatigue. Our standards really have dropped, haven't they? Like my last date, Evelyn said, managing a tired grin despite herself. They reached a heavy door marked with hazard warnings in a dozen languages, each more dire than the last. Daxel punched in a code on the keypad, casting a nervous glance over his shoulder. If this doesn't work, I'll need a new plan. The door slid open with a reluctant groan, revealing a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for them to fit. It was a claustrophobic space, lined with conduits and the occasional spark of faulty wiring. Homie, Rin remarked, stepping inside. Really going for the abandoned death trap aesthetic. Evelyn moved to follow but paused, her instincts prickling. Something wasn't right. The air felt too still, the silence too absolute. Wait, she said, holding up a hand to stop the others. What is it? Daxel asked, his expression wary. Evelyn listened, straining to hear over the pounding of her own heart. There, a faint rustle just on the edge of perception. It wasn't much, but it was enough. We're not alone, she whispered, drawing her blaster. You sure? Rin asked, his hand already moving to his own weapon. Evelyn nodded, her grip tightening. Positive, they moved cautiously, the tunnel stretching ahead like the maw of some great beast waiting to swallow them whole. Every step was slow, deliberate, the silence a tangible weight pressing down on them. Then, without warning, the air was filled with the whine of blaster fire. The shots came from above, where a second level overlooked the tunnel, a perfect vantage point for an ambush. Get down! Evelyn shouted, diving for cover as the bolt streaked past, scorching the walls. What the hell? Daxel yelled, ducking beside her. How'd they get the drop on us? Must have known we'd come this way, Evelyn said, gritting her teeth. Someone tipped them off. Rin returned fire, his shots precise despite the awkward angle. Guess they didn't get the memo about playing nice. Daxel, how close is your friend? Avalon asked, risking a glance at the upper level. Not close enough, Daxel replied, frustration clear in his voice. Avalon cursed under her breath. They were pinned down, outnumbered and outmaneuvered. A bad combination even on a good day. What do we do? Rin asked, his voice tight with tension. Avalon thought fast, weighing their options and finding each one wanting. But then that was the nature of their lives, always fighting against the odds, always on the brink of disaster. We improvise, she said finally, her eyes meeting Rin's. Like always, great, Rin said, shaking his head. My favorite plan. Daxel worked frantically at his datapad, muttering a stream of invective under his breath. If I can just… There, suddenly the lights flared back on, blinding in their intensity. The abrupt change threw their attackers into disarray, buying the team a precious few moments. Move! Avalon shouted, seizing the chance. They scrambled forward, ducking and weaving through the chaos. Blaster fire continued to rain down, but they were moving too fast, too unpredictably for the attackers to get a clear shot. They reached another door, this one unmarked and featureless. There was no time to hesitate. Avalon hit the control panel, praying it would open. It did, revealing a small chamber filled with machinery and the reassuring hum of technology. In here, she called, ushering the others inside. As the door slid shut behind them, cutting off the sound of pursuit, they collapsed against the walls, breathing hard. Remind me, Rin gasped, why do we keep doing this? Because we're idiots, Daxel said, a wry grin on his face despite the sweat and grime. Idiots with a cause, Avalon corrected, her voice firm despite the tremor of adrenaline. For a moment there was silence, broken only by their labored breathing. Then Avalon drew herself up, her resolve hardening once more. All right, she said, looking from one to the other. Let's see what other surprises this place has in store, because if there was one thing Avalon knew, it was that the arena never ran out of surprises, and neither did they. The door clicked shut with a finality that should have been comforting, but in the galactic arena, doors were just as likely to trap you as they were to protect you. Avalon leaned against the wall, catching her breath while her mind raced faster than a Slarkian in a buffet line. Friend of yours, Daxel? She asked, tilting her head toward the closed door, the implied sarcasm heavier than a Slarkian's mother-in-law. Daxel shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. More of a professional acquaintance. Difference is he hasn't shot at me, yet. Rin, who was busy examining a scorch mark on his sleeve, chimed in. I'd like to keep it that way. My dry cleaner charges extra for plasma burns. Avalon let out a breathy laugh, something akin to a bark. In this place, humor was as much a survival tool as her blaster. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, but if they were going to get out of this, they needed a plan tighter than a Vorthan's wallet. Okay, Avalon started, reasserting her leadership like a general in a war that had long since stopped making sense. We need to rally what's left of our allies. That last skirmish was just the opening act, and I'm not keen on seeing the main event. Great, a pep talk, Rin quipped, though his grin didn't quite reach his eyes. Always loved those before we run headfirst into death. Daxel tapped away at his datapad, eyes flickering between them and the device. I've been doing some digging, between the ducking and dodging, and I found something interesting. He waved the datapad for emphasis. An ancient artifact. Could be our ticket out of this hellhole. Avalon raised an eyebrow. Ancient artifact. Please tell me it's more than a fancy paperweight. Daxel smirked, a flash of teeth in the dimly lit room. This paperweight could shift the balance of power in this entire arena. If we get our hands on it, we might have a shot at surviving this mess. Or, Rin interjected, we just paint a bigger target on our backs. I mean, who doesn't love a good intergalactic treasure hunt? Avalon sighed, eyes narrowing in thought. She didn't trust artifacts any more than she trusted a Slarkian's promise, but desperate times called for desperate measures. And this was about as desperate as it got. All right, let's assume this artifact is real and not just a figment of your overactive imagination, Dax, she said. Where is it? Daxel glanced at his datapad, lips curling in a mischievous smile that promised trouble. Central partition, under the arena. It's practically begging for us to swipe it. That's the heart of enemy territory, Rin pointed out, ever the voice of reason, or maybe just the voice of someone who didn't want to die today. Exactly, Avalon agreed, leaning into the insanity of the plan. Which means it's the last place they'll expect us to go. I'm starting to think you enjoy this, Rin said, shaking his head in mock despair. Wouldn't you? Avalon grinned, though the humor didn't quite hide the edge of nerves beneath it. With a shared look of resigned camaraderie, they set off again, slipping into the shadows like ghosts with a vendetta. The corridors of the arena stretched out before them, a twisted labyrinth of deceit and danger. As they moved, the low hum of the arena whispered around them, a constant, unnerving reminder of where they were and what was likely waiting for them. Remember, Avalon said, her voice low but firm, we stick to the plan. Get in, grab the artifact, get out. Easy as pie. Yeah, Rin muttered, if the pie's made of explosive custard and the baker's trying to kill you. They reached a narrow passage that led deeper into the arena's heart, the fluorescent lights flickering like they were undecided about whether they wanted to illuminate the way or plunge them into darkness. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt electronics, a fitting perfume for their venture into chaos. Daxel, you sure about this? Avalon asked, her eyes scanning the walls for any sign of a trap. As sure as I am that the guy at the noodle stand gave me food poisoning last week, he replied cheerfully. But hey, risks and rewards, right. Remind me to never let you pick the lunch spots again, Rin said, his voice a mix of jest and genuine caution. They halted at another door, this one marked with symbols that looked far too ominous to mean anything good. Daxel approached the control panel, fingers dancing over the keys like he was playing the galaxy's most lethal piano. Last chance to back out, he said, though they all knew that wasn't an option. Avalon straightened, drawing her blaster with a determination that brooked no argument. Open it. The door slid aside with a groan, revealing a chamber that was both grand and terrifying, a fitting throne room for whatever ancient relic lay within. It was filled with machinery and cabling, the sort of place where secrets were kept and nightmares were born. At least it's not dusty, Rin commented, peering into the shadowed corners. Focus, Avalon reminded him, stepping forward like she owned the place. We're looking for something that seems out of place, like us, Daxel offered, earning a chuckle from Rin. Within moments their eyes settled on a pedestal at the center, a rather cliché setup for something supposedly powerful. On it sat a small, intricately designed object that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. That's it? Rin asked, skepticism dripping from every word. Looks like a designer paperweight. Daxel lifted the artifact from its resting place with the reverence of someone handling a live grenade. Looks can be deceiving. This thing could either save us or blow us to kingdom come. Not much of a choice then, Avalon said, though her eyes were fixed firmly on the artifact, as if daring it to disappoint her. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light, alarms blaring a discordant symphony of impending doom. The very walls seemed to vibrate with hostility, and they knew they weren't alone anymore. Well, they noticed, Rin said, drawing his weapon with a resigned sigh. Let's hope they're not as attached to this place as we are, Daxel remarked, shoving the artifact into his satchel with a casualness that belied the tension crackling through the air. The chamber door burst open, revealing a squad of Vorthans and their Slarkian muscle, expressions a mix of smug triumph and irritation. The leader, a sleek Vorthan named Kalax, stepped forward. Thought you could simply walk in and take it. Kalax's voice was a silken purr, though the menace beneath was as sharp as a blade. Avalon stepped forward, her blaster leveled, but her smile was pure mischief. Walking out's the challenge. Care to join us, Daxel, never one to miss an opportunity for gallows humor, added, we heard you throw the best goodbye parties. As if on cue, the room erupted into chaos. The team moved like a well-oiled machine, each action perfectly choreographed amidst the chaos of blaster fire and shouted taunts. "Rin, take the left," Avalon shouted, her voice cutting through the cacophony like a hot knife. "Already on it." Rin replied, diving to the side and taking out a pair of Vorthons with a series of well-placed shots. Daxel was a flurry of motion, fingers flying over his datapad even as he ducked behind a console. "Avalon, this would be a great time for a distraction on it," she called back, firing a shot that ricocheted off the wall and hit a power conduit. The resulting explosion was enough to send the Vorthons scattering. Kalax hissed in frustration, snapping his jaws in a way that implied he was imagining doing the same to them. "You can't escape, watch us," Avalon taunted, moving toward the exit with all the grace of a dancer and the speed of someone who really didn't want to die today. They charged through the door just as the room behind them erupted into flames, the artifact's glow casting an eerie light over their hurried escape. "Did you have to blow it up?" Rin asked, not quite breathless but definitely winded. "Think of it as a parting gift," Avalon replied, a wicked grin on her face. They emerged into the labyrinthine corridors, the way back an impossible tangle of twists and turns. But they kept moving, the promise of survival spurring them on even as the arena itself seemed to conspire against them. "Daxel, tell me you've got a plan," Avalon said, not slowing her pace. "Of course," Daxel replied, panting slightly but grinning wider than ever. "Find the nearest airlock and hope the universe believes in second chances." Avalon laughed, the sound a mixture of relief and disbelief. In this place, it was as close to optimism as they were likely to get. They paused at a junction, the distant sound of pursuit echoing through the walls. Rin dug into his bag, pulling out a small device and handing it to Avalon. "Here," he said, "in case we need to make things interesting." "What is it?" she asked, eyeing the object with suspicion. "Just a little something I whipped up," Rin replied, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. "Let's call it a distraction grenade." She nodded, slipping the device into her pocket. "You're full of surprises, Rin, just trying to keep up with you two," he said with a wink. Daxel tapped at his datapad, eyes glued to the screen. "Found an airlock. Just a few corridors over. Then what are we waiting for?" Avalon said, already moving. They dashed through the corridors, footsteps echoing like a drumbeat of impending doom. The arena was alive around them, a cacophony of noise and danger, but they were a single-minded force racing toward freedom. As they neared their destination, the sound of pursuit grew closer, the enemy's determination a tangible presence at their backs. There, Daxel pointed, indicating a door marked with a universal symbol for "Get the hell out." They skidded to a halt in front of it, hands moving in concert to override the lock. The door slid open, revealing the airlock beyond, a narrow chamber that might be their salvation. "Hurry," Rin urged, glancing back at the corridor. They piled into the airlock, the door closing with a hiss of compressed air. Avalon took the small grenade from her pocket, hesitating only a moment before tossing it back into the corridor. "Here's hoping they like fireworks," she said, hitting the button to seal the airlock. The door closed just as the grenade detonated, the explosion shaking the walls and cutting off any sound from the other side. They were safe. For now. "Think that'll hold them?" Rin asked, his voice a little too hopeful. "Long enough," Avalon replied, though she knew better than to count on luck. Daxel punched in the launch sequence, the airlock systems humming to life as they prepared to eject into the starry void. "This is insane," he said, though his grin betrayed a thrill he couldn't quite hide. "Wouldn't have it any other way," Avalon replied, her own smile a reflection of his. With a final, breathless moment of anticipation, the airlock's doors opened, and they were launched into the vacuum of space, the safety of their ship mere moments away. As they tumbled into the vast, cold unknown, Avalon marveled at the absurdity of it all. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and quite possibly out of their minds, but they were alive, and that was what mattered. In the galactic arena, survival was its own kind of victory. And as long as they drew breath, they'd continue to fight, to laugh in the face of impossible odds, and to chase whatever hope they could find in the darkness. Because in a universe that thrived on chaos, they were humanity's finest, scrappy, irreverent, and stubborn as hell. The airlock door hissed shut behind Avalon, and for a moment the three of them floated in the empty vastness of space, their ship tantalizingly close. It felt like one of those old amusement rides back on Earth where you were strapped in, spun around, then spat out in the wrong direction. Only now, if they didn't reach the ship, there was no cotton candy at the end of the ride. Just a cold, infinite void and the prospect of becoming a cautionary tale for future adventurers. "Daxel, tell me you remembered to pay for parking," Rin quipped, his voice crackling over the comms. "Funny you should mention that," Daxel replied, chuckling. "I think we're about to find out if that bootleg docking pass works." Avalon snorted, adjusting her thruster pack to correct their trajectory. "If not, I vote we bill the Slarkians for the inconvenience." Hell, they probably have a tab going somewhere. As they drifted closer to their ship, Avalon couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had just spun the roulette wheel, and their odds were somewhere between 0 and none. The Vorthans and Slarkians weren't going to let them waltz out of the arena without some kind of send-off, and it was only a matter of time before they caught up. "Should I be the one to say it?" Rin asked. "Say what?" Daxel replied, nudging the ship's docking mechanism with a practiced ease. "That we're probably screwed," Rin said, finally catching his breath as they maneuvered into the airlock. "But hey, at least we'll go down in history as the idiots who pilfered a priceless artifact and lived long enough to regret it." The airlock clamped onto their ship with a resounding thunk, and Avalon let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They stumbled inside, the artificial gravity kicking in with a jolt that almost sent Daxel sprawling. "Home sweet hunk of metal," Avalon said, patting the bulkhead affectionately. Daxel deposited the artifact onto a console, its glow pulsating with an anxious energy that seemed to mirror their own. "This thing better be worth the trouble," he muttered, eyeing it like it might explode, or worse, demand a performance review. "Right, because the universe is known for being fair and just," Avalon replied, rolling her eyes. "Let's fire up the engines and get gone before Kalax and his merry band of lizards catch up. What's the plan, fearless leader?" Rin asked, sliding into his seat and strapping in. Avalon shrugged, a half-smile playing on her lips. "We do what humans do best, improvise and hope to hell it works." "Daxel, how do you even plan to use that thing?" Rin asked, gesturing at the artifact. "I mean, it's not like it came with an instruction manual. It's called a dark matter conduit for a reason," Daxel said, fingers flying over the control panel. "And by reason, I mean I'm going to see if I can make it do something useful before it burns a hole in our hull." "Always the optimist," Avalon said, settling into her own seat and firing up the engines. The ship hummed to life, the vibrations a comforting reminder that, for all its quirks, it was still more reliable than the galactic arena's odds. As they powered up, the artifact began to glow brighter, its hum resonating through the ship like a promise or a threat. Daxel tapped at his datapad, pulling up the schematics he'd managed to swipe from the arena's system. "Okay, if I'm reading this right, and let's face it, that's a 50-50 shot. I should be able to harness the dark matter to boost our engines, and if you're wrong," Rin asked, raising an eyebrow. "Then we'll probably invent a new way to die," Daxel replied, not looking up. "But hey, it'll be one hell of a light show." Avalon shook her head, a grin tugging at her lips despite the circumstances. "All right, let's do this. We've got nothing to lose except our lives, reputation, and whatever dignity we're pretending we had left." Daxel adjusted a few settings, the artifact's glow intensifying as the ship's systems began to strain. "Here goes nothing," he said, flipping a final switch. For a moment, nothing happened, and Avalon could almost hear the universe laughing at them. Then, with a roar that echoed through the ship, the engines surged to life, the dark matter conduit channeling an energy unlike anything they'd ever experienced. Holy, Rin began, but whatever expletive he'd intended was lost in the cacophony of power coursing through the ship. They shot forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light as the arena fell away behind them. The artifact continued to hum, its light a kaleidoscope of promise and peril as they sped into the unknown. "Well, I'll be damned," Daxel said, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It actually worked." Avalon laughed, the sound bright and defiant in the face of their impossible odds. "See, humanity's not as under-equipped as everyone thinks. Yeah, we're just a bunch of reckless maniacs who refuse to die quietly," Rin added, settling back with a relieved sigh. The artifact dimmed slightly, its energy stabilizing into a steady pulse. They were safe for the moment, but Avalon knew better than to let her guard down. The whole galaxy would be after them now, not just for the artifact, but for the audacity of proving that humanity wasn't just a footnote in someone else's story. "So, do we tell the Alliance that we've got a game changer, or let them sweat a little longer?" Daxel asked, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Avalon considered it, her mind racing with the possibilities. They could leverage this into something bigger, a real seat at the table, a chance to play by their own rules for once. Or they could disappear into the stars, leaving the rest of the galaxy to wonder what happened to the humans who dared to defy the odds. "Let's keep them guessing for now," she said, her voice firm with the weight of their decision. "We've earned the right to call the shots for once." Rin nodded, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Here's to humanity, stubborn, unpredictable, and damn proud of it." As the ship hurtled through space, Avalon allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph, the stars stretching out before them like a promise of new beginnings. They'd taken on the galaxy and won, against all logic and reason, a testament to the human spirit and its refusal to be written off. For now, their story was far from over, and as long as there were stars to chase and battles to fight, they'd be there, laughing in the face of adversity, daring the universe to do its worst. Because in a place where survival was measured in moments and victories were fleeting, humanity was carving out its own legend, one reckless adventure at a time. And that, Avalon thought with a smile, was worth all the risks in the galaxy. Avalon leaned back in her chair, exhaling a breath that carried the weight of 1,000 close calls and near-death experiences. Her eyes drifted to the viewport, where stars zipped past like a light show put on by a very drunk cosmic DJ. She couldn't help but chuckle. Humanity might not be the biggest dog in this fight, but damned if they hadn't just proven they had the loudest bark. "So, this is what victory feels like, huh?" Rin mused, feet propped up on the console. "Not bad. Almost worth the impending talk with the Alliance." Almost. Daxel chimed in, grinning like he'd just pulled off a heist, which technically he had. "I'd say that was worth every second of terror. Besides, it's not every day you get to stick it to some overgrown lizards and bugs." Avalon smirked, the image of Kaelax's face when they'd made their daring escape forever etched in her mind. Priceless. Hey, they got what they deserved for underestimating us. "Who'd have thought a bunch of hairless apes could beat the odds?" Rin snorted. "Talk about poetic justice. Maybe next time they'll think twice before tangling with the galaxy's most persistent screw-ups." As the laughter faded, a comfortable silence settled over the crew, the hum of the ship's engines a steady reminder of their improbable escape. Avalon felt a strange sense of calm wash over her, a rarity in their line of work. She glanced over at Daxel, who was still tinkering with the artifact, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You know you're gonna break that thing if you keep poking at it," she teased. Daxel looked up, feigning innocence. "Hey, I'm just making sure it stays in one piece. I'd hate for us to go through all that trouble just to have it turn into space dust. Yeah, that'd be a real shame," Rin added, deadpan. Avalon would miss her new toy. "It's not a toy, it's a strategic advantage," Avalon shot back, trying to sound convincing. "And it's a damn sight more exciting than anything we've had before." "Ah, There's the real Avalon, Daxel said, chuckling. Always looking for the next thrill. Avalon rolled her eyes, though a smile tugged at her lips. Can you blame me? The galaxy's a big, boring place if you don't spice it up a bit. Speaking of spice, Rin said, leaning forward with a conspiratorial grin. What's the plan for our newfound fame? We could use it to score some decent gigs, maybe even a real paycheck for once. Or, Daxel interjected, we could just ride this wave as long as it lasts. Who knows how long before someone figures out how we pulled this off? Avalon considered their options, her mind racing with possibilities. They'd managed the impossible, and now the galaxy was watching. Maybe it was time to take advantage of that attention, make sure humanity got its due. We'll play it by ear, she decided, meeting their gazes with a determined glint in her eyes. We've got a chance to do something big, something that'll put us on the map for good. But first, we need to make sure we're ready for whatever comes next. Sounds like a plan, Rin said, nodding. Just tell me there's at least one stop on the way that involves a real bed and a hot meal. Priorities, Rin. Priorities, Daxel quipped, shaking his head with mock seriousness. As the crew settled into their routine, Avalon allowed herself a moment to reflect on how far they'd come. They'd faced down Vorthons, Slarkians, and the cold, indifferent void of space, and they'd come out on top. Not bad for a ragtag bunch of misfits who'd started out with little more than a rusty ship and a lot of nerve. And now they had a seat at the galaxy's table, a chance to shape their own future rather than just survive in someone else's story. It was equal parts exhilarating and terrifying, but Avalon wouldn't have it any other way. She glanced over at Daxel, who was still fussing over the artifact like a mother hen with her last egg. You think they'll ever let us live this down? Daxel shrugged, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Maybe. But who cares? We did what nobody thought we could, and that's worth more than all the credits in the universe. Agreed, Rin said, raising an imaginary glass. Here's to us, the galaxy's least likely heroes. Avalon joined in the toast, her heart swelling with a sense of camaraderie and pride. They'd done the impossible, and now the future was theirs to shape. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they'd face them together, with the same irreverent humor and reckless determination that had gotten them this far. Because in a universe that thrived on chaos and uncertainty, the only thing they could count on was each other, and that would always be enough. As the ship continued its journey through the stars, Avalon allowed herself a rare moment of peace, content in the knowledge that they'd carved out their place in the cosmos. And as long as they had breath in their lungs and a fire in their hearts, they'd continue to defy the odds and write their own story. After all, humanity had proven it was more than just a footnote in someone else's saga. They were the authors of their destiny, and they weren't about to let anyone forget it. Think we'll get a parade? Rin asked, a cheeky grin on his face. Avalon snorted, a parade? In space? If the Alliance is anything like they used to be, the most we're getting is a pat on the back and a stern warning not to do it again. Ah, the sweet taste of bureaucratic gratitude, Daxel said, shaking his head. Nothing like risking your neck just to get a lecture from someone who's never left their cushy office. I'd take the lecture, Rin chimed in. Better than another close encounter with Kalax's idea of hospitality. Besides, who needs parades when you've got a ship and a damn good story to tell? They shared a laugh, the sound echoing through the ship's cabin, a testament to the bond forged in the fires of adversity. Avalon knew they'd face more challenges, more close calls, but for the moment she allowed herself to savor their triumph. Because in a galaxy that often seemed hell-bent on proving humanity's insignificance, they'd carved out their own legend, one reckless adventure at a time. And as long as there were stars to chase and tales to tell, they'd be there, laughing in the face of danger, daring the universe to throw its worst at them. Here's to the next adventure, Avalon declared, a fierce grin spreading across her face. The sentiment was echoed by her crew, their voices filled with the promise of new beginnings and the thrill of the unknown. Together, they'd face whatever the universe had in store, with humor, grit, and an unshakable belief in their own resilience. Because in the end, that was what set humanity apart, a refusal to back down, a defiance that burned brighter than any star. And as they hurtled toward whatever future awaited, Avalon knew one thing for sure: they were just getting started.